Welcome back to Super English Talks, the channel where we learn about language, ideas, and personal growth one episode at a time. Today, we're going to talk about a powerful idea, the word impossible. You've probably heard someone say, "That's impossible." Maybe you've even said it yourself. But what if the word impossible isn't really true most of the time? What if it's just something we tell ourselves because we're afraid to try? You see, many of the limits we believe in are not real limits. They're not rules of nature. They're not unchangeable truths. They're just mental walls we've built in our own minds, and sometimes society helps us build them. These walls are made of beliefs and assumptions we've accepted without even realizing it. Think about it for a moment. What if the things you've always thought were impossible are actually just things you haven't tried yet? What if those things are possible, but you've been told, or you've told yourself, that they're not? Imagine if you could let go of those beliefs. Imagine if you could break free from those invisible walls. Suddenly, the things that once seemed far away or unreachable might start to look a lot closer. The possibilities in your life would grow. You'd begin to see opportunities where before you only saw problems. Now, I'm not saying everything in life is easy. Some things really do take hard work, patience, and effort. Some goals take years to reach. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about doing the impossible like flying without a plane or breathing underwater. What we're talking about is the way we use the word impossible to stop ourselves from even trying. It's that small voice inside your head that says things like, "You can't do that. You're not good enough. That's too hard for you. You'll never make it." When we listen to that voice, we stop before we even begin. We tell ourselves no before life has the chance to say yes. So, ask yourself, how many times have you said no to something because you thought it was too difficult? How many times have you avoided a dream, a project, or an opportunity because it seemed too big or too scary? How often have you stayed in your comfort zone just because stepping out of it felt impossible? But was it really impossible? Or did you just decide that it was? That's the question I want you to think about today. What if you stopped accepting impossible as the truth? What if you started seeing it as a challenge, a sign that there's something new to learn, something exciting to explore? Language has power. Words shape the way we think. When we say impossible, we close the door. But when we say maybe, or let's try, or even why not, we open that door again. So, what if we change the meaning of impossible? What if instead of seeing it as something that stops us, we see it as something that inspires us? Something that says, "Go ahead. Look closer." You might be surprised. In this episode, we're going to explore that idea. We'll talk about how our beliefs shape our reality, how we can build resilience when things get tough, and how to face the mental barriers that keep us stuck in one place. By the end of this episode, I hope you'll see impossible in a whole new way, not as a wall that blocks you, but as a doorway that leads to growth, learning, and new beginnings. So, are you ready? Let's dive in together and discover that maybe, just maybe, impossible is only an illusion. What does impossible really mean? Have you ever stopped and really thought about what the word impossible means? We use it all the time, don't we? We say things like, "That's impossible," or "I can't do that. It's impossible," as if it's a fact that can't be argued with. But is it really? What are we actually saying when we use that word? Where does that idea even come from? And how does believing in impossible affect the way we think, act, and live? Let's take a closer look. Breaking down the word. The word impossible is made of two parts. I'm meaning not and possible, meaning able to be done. So, at its most basic level, impossible simply means not able to be done. Pretty straightforward, right? But here's the real question. How often do we actually face something that's truly, completely impossible? Are there really that many things in life that can't be done at all? Or are most of them just things that feel too hard, too new, or too unfamiliar? Maybe the problem isn't that something is impossible. Maybe it just seems that way for now. How language shapes reality. Language is powerful. The words we use don't just describe our experiences, they also shape how we see those experiences. When we say, "That's impossible," we're not only making a statement, we're building a belief. We're telling our minds, "Don't even try." And once we do that, our brain stops looking for answers, stops searching for solutions, and stops believing that change is possible. It's like closing a door before you've even peeked inside. This is why the word impossible can be dangerous. It doesn't just describe a situation, it defines it. And once we label something as impossible, we often stop looking for ways to make it possible. A mental barrier, not a physical one. In many cases, impossible isn't about the task itself, it's about how we think about the task. It's not an external wall blocking us, it's an internal barrier we've built ourselves. Think about it. How many times have you believed something couldn't be done, only to later find that, with the right mindset, tools, or help, you actually could do it? What changed? The task didn't. You did. Your perspective shifted. You found a way around the problem. You saw possibilities you hadn't seen before. That's the power of the mind. The mental block effect. When we face something challenging, our brains sometimes create what's called a mental block. A mental block happens when our thoughts trap us in a loop of doubt. We start telling ourselves stories like, "This is too hard. I'm not smart enough. I don't have the right skills. I'll probably fail anyway." And the more we repeat those thoughts, the more real they feel. We start to believe them. When that happens, our focus narrows. We stop seeing possibilities and only see problems. We stop imagining what could go right and start imagining what could go wrong. It's like walking through a thick fog. Everything looks unclear and uncertain. You can't see where to go, so you convince yourself there's no way forward. But as soon as the fog begins to lift, you realize there was a path all along. You just couldn't see it before. That's what happens when we let go of the word impossible. Changing the way we think. The truth is, impossible often isn't a fact, it's a feeling. It's a reflection of how we see ourselves and the world around us. When we start to question that feeling, when we ask, "Is this really impossible, or do I just think it is?" we open up new space for growth. We start to look for answers instead of excuses. We start to take small steps instead of standing still. We start to believe that maybe, just maybe, impossible isn't the end of the story, it's just the beginning of a challenge waiting to be overcome. So next time you catch yourself saying, "That's impossible," pause for a second. Ask yourself, is it truly impossible? Or is it just something I don't know how to do yet? Because once you shift your thinking, you'll realize that impossible is often just a word, not a fact. And behind that word, there's usually a world full of hidden possibilities waiting to be discovered. What if the only limits are the ones we set? But here's the big question. What if that narrow view, the one we create in our own minds, is the only thing standing between us and success? What if the real obstacle isn't the world around us, but the limits we set for ourselves? You've probably heard the saying, "The only limits are the ones you set for yourself." It might sound like a cliché, but it's actually a powerful truth. The boundaries we believe in, the lines we draw between what's possible and what's not, are often not as solid as they seem. They exist mostly in our minds. If we could learn to broaden our perspective, challenge our assumptions, and step outside the box of what we think we know, we might begin to see the world and ourselves in a completely new way. What once looked like a wall could suddenly look like a door. What once felt like an obstacle could start to look like an opportunity. The power of language. This is where language becomes incredibly important. The way we talk about things, especially challenges, shapes the way we experience them. Have you ever noticed that the words we use can either lift us up or hold us back? When we say something like, "That's impossible," it's as if we're giving up before we've even started. We're telling ourselves, "Don't bother, it can't be done." But what happens if we change the language? What if instead we say, "This is difficult, but I can figure it out," or "This is a challenge I can work through"? Those small changes in language create huge shifts in mindset. Suddenly, the problem isn't a dead end, it's something to explore. It becomes a test of creativity, patience, and resilience rather than a reason to quit. The way we speak influences the way we think, and the way we think influences the way we act. If we use language that opens doors instead of closing them, we begin to train our minds to look for solutions, not limitations. We move from a mindset of defeat to a mindset of growth and possibility. Redefining impossible. Let's look at this idea from a different angle. What happens when we encounter situations where the word impossible no longer applies? Think about some of the incredible achievements throughout human history, things that once seemed completely unthinkable. People landing on the moon. Doctors finding cures for deadly diseases. Engineers and inventors creating technology that used to exist only in science fiction. For centuries, many of these ideas were labeled as impossible. But they weren't. They were just waiting for the right people, people who were willing to dream bigger, think differently, and refuse to accept that word as final. Those people didn't see impossible as a fact. They saw it as a challenge to overcome. The power of perspective. Have you ever had a moment when something that seemed impossible suddenly became clear? Maybe we're stuck on a problem, frustrated, ready to give up, and then, all at once, the answer came to you. That aha or eureka moment usually doesn't mean the problem magically changed. What changed was your perspective. You saw it differently. You found a new angle, a new way of looking at the same situation. That's the key. Many things we call impossible aren't impossible at all. They're just waiting for the right combination of understanding, patience, and creativity. So the next time you hear yourself say, "That's impossible," pause for a moment and ask, is it truly impossible? Or is it just unfamiliar, uncomfortable, or difficult right now? Often, the word impossible is really just our mind's way of saying, "I don't know how to do this yet," turning impossible into an invitation. Maybe we need to start seeing impossible not as the end of the road, but as a signal, a reminder to slow down, rethink, and look again. Instead of meaning it can't be done, what if impossible meant there's something new to learn here? That small shift changes everything. It invites us to grow, to experiment, and to stretch beyond what feels safe or easy. The truth is, impossible is not a permanent label. It's just a temporary description, a reflection of our current understanding, not a final judgment on what's achievable. The final thought. In the end, impossible is just a word, and like all words, it only has power if we give it power. When we look closely, we see that impossible isn't a universal truth. It's a mirror reflecting our own fears, beliefs, and mental boundaries. But when we start to question it, when we dare to ask, "What if it's not?" something amazing happens. We open ourselves up to growth, creativity, and transformation. That's when impossible begins to fade, and what once seemed out of reach starts to come within our grasp. Because maybe, just maybe, the impossible isn't something to avoid, it's something to explore. When something feels impossible, the next time you face something that feels impossible, pause for a moment and reflect. Ask yourself, Is this really impossible, or is it just waiting for a shift in perspective, a change in mindset, or a new approach? Sometimes, the answer isn't about what you're trying to do, it's about how you're looking at it. The moment you start to see things differently, what once felt out of reach can suddenly seem doable. The truth might surprise you. The role of beliefs in shaping reality. Have you ever stopped to think about how much your beliefs shape your experience of life? In many ways, our beliefs act like the lens of a camera. They focus our attention, color our perceptions, and influence how we interpret what we see. Your beliefs shape your daily choices, your long-term goals, and even how you define success or failure. They influence the way you talk to yourself, the risks you take, and the dreams you decide to chase. But here's the catch: not all beliefs are helpful. Some beliefs empower us and push us forward, while others quietly hold us back, trapping us inside invisible walls of doubt and fear. Conscious versus unconscious beliefs. Let's start with the difference between conscious and unconscious beliefs. Conscious beliefs are the ones you're fully aware of, the ones you can easily explain if someone asks you what you believe. For example, hard work leads to success. Honesty is the best policy. Practice makes perfect. These beliefs guide your choices in obvious ways. You know they're there, and you probably live by them intentionally. Unconscious beliefs, on the other hand, are much sneakier. They sit quietly in the background, shaping your behavior and emotions without you even realizing it. You might hold beliefs like, "I'm just not good at math. I'll never be a leader. People like me don't succeed." You may not say these things out loud, but they influence your confidence, decisions, and actions every day. The hidden power of limiting beliefs. Here's the thing. Many of these hidden beliefs are limiting, and they're not based on truth. They're often built from old experiences, fears, or messages we absorbed from society, school, or family when we were younger. Maybe you failed at something once, and your mind decided, "I'm just not good at that." Maybe someone told you, "You'll never make it," and part of you believed them. Over time, these small, silent beliefs grow stronger. They create a pattern, a mental loop that keeps replaying itself. For example, if you believe you're bad at public speaking, you'll probably avoid opportunities to practice it. Because you never practice, you never improve, which then reinforces the belief that you're just not good at it. That's how a self-fulfilling prophecy works. The belief creates the result. Breaking free from limiting beliefs. Now think back to a time when you broke free from one of those limiting beliefs. Maybe you once thought, "I could never run a marathon," but then you trained, stayed consistent, and eventually crossed that finish line. Or maybe you used to believe, "I'm not leadership material," but when life gave you the chance to lead, you stepped up and did better than you ever imagined. In those moments, something powerful happened. It wasn't the task itself that changed. It was your belief that changed. Once you started to challenge the old story in your mind, the one that said, "You can't," everything shifted. You created space for possibility, and reality began to adjust to your new belief. That's the true power of belief. It shapes not just how we see the world, but how the world responds to us. Empowering beliefs versus limiting beliefs. Let's look at two types of beliefs and how they affect your life. Empowering beliefs are the ones that build you up. They give you courage, confidence, and energy. They sound like this. Every challenge is an opportunity to grow. I can learn anything if I put in the effort. It's never too late to start. These beliefs open doors. They make you more resilient and more willing to take action. Limiting beliefs, on the other hand, sound like this. "I'm not good enough. I'll never succeed. It's too late for me." These thoughts close doors before you've even tried to walk through them. They create doubt and fear, making you hesitate or give up before you've started. Your beliefs, in many ways, act like the steering wheel of your life. Empowering beliefs guide you forward. Limiting beliefs keep you stuck. The role of the mind, cognitive biases. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Our minds don't always show us reality as it is, they show us reality as we expect it to be. Psychologists call this a cognitive bias, a mental shortcut that helps us make sense of the world, but also sometimes distorts it. If you believe something strongly enough, your brain will start to look for evidence to confirm it. For instance, if you believe, "I always fail," you'll start to notice every mistake you make and ignore the times you succeed. But if you believe, "I'm capable of learning," your brain will start spotting progress, effort, and growth, and that reinforces confidence instead of fear. In other words, your mind looks for proof of whatever it already believes. That's why changing your beliefs, even just a little, can completely change your reality. The big takeaway: beliefs are powerful. They shape your thoughts, guide your actions, and ultimately define your results. The key is to become more aware of them, to notice which beliefs lift you up and which ones hold you back. Because once you start identifying those limiting beliefs, you gain the power to change them. And when you change your beliefs, you change your world. Understanding cognitive biases. Our brains are powerful, but they're not perfect. Every day, we process thousands of pieces of information, and to make sense of it all, our brains use shortcuts, quick ways of thinking that help us make decisions faster. These shortcuts are known as cognitive biases. Cognitive biases can be helpful because they save time and mental energy. But they can also distort reality, cause us to make irrational decisions, and, most importantly, reinforce our limiting beliefs. How biases reinforce limiting beliefs. Let's look at one of the most common examples: confirmation bias. Confirmation bias happens when we pay attention only to the information that supports what we already believe and ignore anything that challenges it. For instance, imagine you have the belief, "I'm not good at public speaking." When you give a presentation, you'll probably remember the times you stumbled over your words or forgot what to say. But you'll forget the moments when you made the audience laugh, explained something clearly, or received positive feedback. Why? Because your brain is unconsciously looking for proof to confirm your belief. And the more evidence you collect, the more that belief feels true, even when it's not. This is how confirmation bias keeps us trapped in a cycle of self-doubt. We see what we expect to see. The self-serving bias. Another common mental trap is the self-serving bias. This one works in the opposite way. It makes us explain our successes as the result of luck, timing, or help from others, while blaming ourselves completely for our failures. So when something goes well, we say, "I got lucky." But when something goes wrong, we say, "It's my fault. I'm just not good enough." Over time, this kind of thinking damages our self-esteem and self-confidence. We start to believe that our past failures define our future, even when those failures were caused by things we couldn't control. And once again, our brain builds a loop, a repeating story where we always come up short. The danger of mental loops. When biases like these take control, we can end up living inside a mental loop of negativity. We stop noticing progress. We focus only on mistakes. We stop trying new things because we assume the outcome will always be the same. In that state, growth becomes almost impossible, not because we can't change, but because we've convinced ourselves that we can't. Step 1. Awareness. So how do we break free from these patterns? The first and most important step is awareness. You can't change what you don't see. You have to start by noticing your thoughts and asking where they come from. Recognize that your beliefs, especially your limiting ones, are not absolute truths. They're not laws of nature. They're simply mental constructs, ideas shaped by your past experiences, fears, or the messages you've absorbed from others. Once you become aware of these patterns, you can start to question them. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? Where did this belief come from? Is this belief helping me or holding me back? These questions help you separate truth from assumption. Step 2. Challenge and reframe. Once you identify a limiting belief, it's time to challenge it. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to repeat positive affirmations you don't really believe. It means shifting your focus toward a more balanced, empowering way of thinking. For example, if you catch yourself thinking, "I'm not good enough for this," try asking, "What proof do I actually have that this is true? Have I ever succeeded at something similar before? What if I can do this? What would that look like?" These kinds of questions move your mind from doubt to possibility. This is where the phrase "change your mindset" becomes more than just motivational talk. It becomes a real, practical tool for growth. Step 3. Replace "I can't" with "how can I?" Shifting your mindset doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process that takes practice and patience. But every time you replace a limiting thought with a question, you're rewiring your brain to think differently. Instead of saying, "I can't do this," try asking, "How can I make this work?" Instead of saying, "It's impossible," ask, "What do I need to learn to make this possible?" That small change in language turns a closed door into an open one. A real-life example. Imagine someone who has spent years saying, "I'm not a creative person." Maybe they've tried painting or writing in the past and didn't like the results. Over time, those experiences built the belief that creativity is something other people have, not them. But what if they changed their perspective? What if they started to see creativity not as a gift you're born with, but as a skill that can be developed with time and effort? They might start experimenting, taking a class, sketching for fun, or writing a little every day. And before long, they'd begin to see improvement. The moment they challenge that belief, they open themselves up to new experiences, new ideas, and new opportunities to grow. Growth is a journey. Breaking free from limiting beliefs isn't a straight path. It's a journey filled with trial and error, progress, and setbacks. There will be days when old thoughts resurface, when you doubt yourself again or feel like you're back at square one. But that doesn't mean you failed. It simply means you're still learning, still growing, and still reshaping the way your mind works. Remember, you are not your past mistakes. You are not your limiting beliefs. You are the person who has the power to challenge them. And that's where real transformation begins. The power of resilience, bouncing back from setbacks. Remember this. Even the most successful people you admire, innovators, leaders, artists, athletes, have all faced doubt, fear, and self-limiting beliefs. What sets them apart isn't that they never felt afraid or uncertain. What sets them apart is that they refuse to be controlled by those thoughts. Instead of letting their limiting beliefs dictate their actions, they chose to act in spite of them. They faced their fears, took risks, and kept moving forward even when the outcome was uncertain. So, what does that mean for you? It means that the next time you face a challenge, you hold the power to decide how you respond. You can choose to stay within the boundaries of your old beliefs, the ones that whisper, "I can't," or "it's too hard." Or you can make a different choice, to break free from those mental barriers and replace them with beliefs that empower you. The truth is, your beliefs are not set in stone. they're fluid, changeable, and completely within your control. And when you begin to shift your beliefs, you also shift your perspective, the way you see the world. And when your perspective changes, so does your experience of life itself. Understanding resilience. We've all experienced setbacks, moments when things didn't go as planned. Maybe it was a personal failure, a missed opportunity, or a dream that felt just out of reach. In those moments, it's easy to feel discouraged and to believe that your path forward has been blocked. But here's the truth. Setbacks are not the end of the road. They're a natural and inevitable part of life. And while we can't always control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. That ability, the strength to keep going when things get tough, is called resilience. Resilience isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning how to bounce back from it. It's the capacity to recover from difficulties, to adapt to change, and to continue striving toward your goals even after disappointment or loss. Being resilient doesn't mean pretending that pain or frustration don't exist. It means facing those emotions honestly, processing them, and still choosing to move forward. It's not about being unshakable, it's about being unbreakable. Resilience is a skill you can build. One of the most empowering truths about resilience is that it's not something you either have or don't have. It's not an innate trait that only a few lucky people are born with. Resilience is a skill, a mental and emotional muscle that can be strengthened through practice and perseverance. Just like building physical strength, developing resilience requires consistent effort. It means allowing yourself to face discomfort, to experience setbacks, and to learn from them rather than avoid them. Every time you face adversity, you have an opportunity to grow stronger. Each challenge teaches you something new about yourself, your patience, your problem solving, your ability to endure. And over time, these small lessons accumulate, building a foundation of inner strength that can withstand even the toughest storms. Learning through setbacks. Think back to a time when you faced a major setback. Maybe you didn't get the job you really wanted. Maybe a personal relationship ended. Maybe a creative project failed after months of effort. In the moment, it probably felt devastating. You might have questioned your abilities or wondered whether it was even worth trying again. But then slowly you began to recover. You reflected on what went wrong, gained clarity, and realized what you could do differently next time. And eventually, you found the strength to try again. That process, from disappointment to reflection to renewed effort, is the heart of resilience. Each time you fall and rise again, you prove to yourself that you are stronger than your circumstances. You learn that failure is not a dead end, but a detour, a redirection toward growth and wisdom. The cycle of growth. Resilience transforms the way we experience life's challenges. When you begin to see setbacks not as proof of inadequacy, but as stepping stones to progress, your entire outlook changes. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can I learn from this?" This shift in mindset turns obstacles into opportunities and failures into teachers. Each challenge becomes a lesson that refines your strength, your patience, and your determination. Over time, you start to realize that resilience isn't just about surviving hardship, it's about thriving through it. It's the quiet confidence that says, "I've been knocked down before and I got back up. I can do it again." And that realization, that you can always rise again, is what makes resilience one of the most powerful forces in the human spirit. The power of persistence, turning setbacks into strength. We've all been there moments when things don't go the way we planned. Maybe it was a project that failed, a dream that didn't come true, or a goal that suddenly felt out of reach. In those moments, it's easy to feel discouraged. Setbacks can shake our confidence and make us wonder if trying again is even worth it. But here's something important to remember. Persistence is one of the most powerful parts of resilience. It's the determination to keep showing up, even when things get hard and the outcome is uncertain. It's about taking one more step when every part of you wants to stop. Think about the writer J.K. Rowling, who was rejected by multiple publishers before Harry Potter finally found a home. She didn't keep going because she knew she'd become one of the most successful authors in the world. She kept going because she believed in her story and understood that failure is part of the process. She didn't see rejection as the end. She saw it as feedback, a lesson on the road to success. That's what makes the difference between people who give up and those who keep going. The key isn't in avoiding failure. It's in embracing it, learning from it, and using it to grow stronger. Failure as a stepping stone. Resilience isn't about never failing. It's about how we react to failure when it happens. When we learn to see failure as something natural, as a part of the journey, it loses its power to control us. Instead of being something to fear, it becomes a stepping stone toward success. People who are resilient don't see failure as a full stop. They see it as a comma, a pause that helps them rethink and try again. With that mindset, even what seems impossible can eventually become possible. So take a moment to reflect on your own life. When was the last time you faced a real setback? How did you react? Did you give up too soon, or did you push through? And most importantly, what did you learn from that experience? Maybe it showed you that you needed to learn a new skill. Maybe it taught you that your first plan wasn't the best one. Or maybe you discovered that you were capable of far more than you thought. Whatever it was, that experience made you stronger, because every time we rise after a fall, we become more resilient. The role of grit. You might have heard the word grit used alongside resilience, and for good reason. Grit is that powerful combination of passion and perseverance for long-term goals. It's the ability to keep going even when the road feels endless. People with grit don't quit easily. They don't let failure define them or tell them who they are. Instead, they use every setback as an opportunity to learn, grow, and refine their approach. The key word here is perseverance, the strength to take small steps forward even when the way ahead isn't clear. Because sometimes progress isn't about giant leaps. It's about showing up again and again, doing your best, and trusting that the effort will eventually lead somewhere meaningful. Seeing challenges differently. Resilience isn't just about determination, it's also about how we see challenges. When something goes wrong, it's easy to feel defeated. But resilient people have learned to reframe their thinking. They look at challenges not as threats, but as opportunities to grow. This shift in perspective is incredibly powerful. It changes everything about the way we respond to life's difficulties. When we start seeing problems as lessons, our fear turns into curiosity. We begin asking questions like, what can I learn from this? Or how can this make me stronger? Instead of running away from challenges, we start to lean into them, knowing that each one helps us build the strength we'll need for the future. Lessons from Thomas Edison. A perfect example of this mindset is Thomas Edison, the famous inventor of the light bulb. He once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Edison's journey was filled with mistakes and setbacks. But he didn't see each failure as proof that his idea was impossible. He saw it as information, as progress. Each experiment taught him something new, something that brought him closer to success. His story reminds us that setbacks are not signs that we should stop. They are signs that we are learning. Every failure moves us forward if we're willing to learn from it. Embracing discomfort. There's another important part of resilience that's often overlooked, the ability to embrace discomfort. Most of us naturally try to avoid situations that make us uncomfortable. We want to stay in our comfort zone, where things feel safe and familiar. But the truth is, growth only happens outside of that zone. Every new challenge, every moment of uncertainty, every time you take a risk, that's where growth happens. Resilience means becoming comfortable with discomfort. It means understanding that the path to improvement isn't always easy or smooth, but that every obstacle is shaping you into someone stronger and wiser. When we learn to face discomfort instead of avoiding it, we develop the emotional and mental toughness needed to face even bigger challenges in the future. The real meaning of resilience. In the end, resilience isn't about pretending to be strong all the time. It's not about never feeling fear, frustration, or disappointment. It's about facing those feelings, accepting them, and moving forward anyway. Resilience is the ability to rise after falling, to find hope in the middle of struggle, and to keep believing in possibility when everything seems impossible. Every time you get back up after a setback, you prove something powerful to yourself, that you are stronger than your circumstances. And that strength, that quiet determination to keep going no matter what, is what turns the impossible into reality. Transformation, turning the impossible into opportunity. When we face setbacks, it's easy to believe that our goal is no longer within reach. Maybe the path seems too steep, the challenge too overwhelming, or the progress too slow. In those moments, doubt can creep in and whisper, maybe this just isn't meant to be. But resilience teaches us something powerful. Those thoughts and feelings are temporary. They are just the first wave of emotion that hits when we face disappointment. If we can breathe, stay patient, and keep going, we begin to see that the challenge is not the end. It's part of the process. Resilience isn't about avoiding obstacles. It's about rising to meet them, knowing that every struggle shapes us, strengthens us, and prepares us for what's ahead. Each time we fall and get back up, we build a little more strength, a little more courage, and a deeper understanding of who we are. So the next time you face a setback, remember this. Resilience is a skill, not a gift. It's something anyone can develop with practice and persistence. It's not about avoiding failure, but about learning from it, adapting, and growing. Every challenge brings you one step closer to success. Every failure is a lesson in disguise. And every time you keep going, even when it's hard, you are proving to yourself that what once seemed impossible might just be possible after all. Turning the impossible into opportunity. We've all had moments when something felt completely out of reach. Maybe it was a dream that seemed too ambitious, a goal that felt too big, or a challenge that made you doubt your own strength. In those moments, the word impossible can feel final, like a wall blocking your path. But what if impossible isn't the end of the story? What if it's actually the beginning of something new, the start of a transformation? Sometimes, what feels impossible at first is simply an invitation to grow. It's a chance to rethink, to reimagine, and to rise beyond what we thought we were capable of. What if instead of seeing impossible as a barrier, we started seeing it as a doorway, one that leads us to discover new possibilities within ourselves? Every challenge has the potential to transform us if we're willing to look at it differently. The power of perspective. At the heart of every transformation lies a shift in perspective. It's the moment when we stop seeing a setback as a roadblock and start seeing it as a lesson. It's when we realize that every failure, every rejection, and every disappointment is actually helping us become stronger, wiser, and more capable. This shift in perspective is what turns difficulty into opportunity. It allows us to look at the same situation, the same problem, and see something entirely new. What once looked like the end of the road suddenly becomes the beginning of a new path. Think about it this way. When you change the way you look at a challenge, the challenge itself begins to change. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" That simple change in mindset can completely transform how you experience life. Personal transformation. Now, let's bring this idea closer to home, to personal transformation. Every one of us has a story of overcoming something that once felt impossible. It could be fear, failure, loss, or self-doubt. And yet, those are often the very moments that shape us the most. Consider someone who has spent years struggling with self-doubt and low self-esteem. For a long time, they might believe that confidence is something they simply don't have, that it belongs to other people. But then something changes. Maybe they start setting small goals, taking tiny steps outside their comfort zone, and proving to themselves that they are capable of more than they thought. With every small victory, their mindset begins to shift. What once felt impossible, feeling confident, speaking up, taking action, slowly starts to become part of their reality. They didn't suddenly find confidence. They built it, one choice at a time. That's what transformation looks like. It's not a sudden moment of change. It's a gradual process, a journey of discovering what's possible when we stop letting fear define us. Seeing the hidden potential in challenges. Every challenge carries within it a seed of possibility. When we face difficulties, we can choose to focus on what's wrong, or we can choose to focus on what we can learn. The difference between feeling stuck and moving forward often comes down to one simple thing: perspective. When we see obstacles as opportunities, we start to unlock new levels of growth. We become more creative, more resourceful, and more determined. We begin to realize that what once seemed impossible wasn't impossible at all. It was just waiting for us to see it in a new light. Transformation, at its core, isn't about changing who we are. It's about revealing who we've been capable of becoming all along. It's about turning pain into strength, fear into courage, and doubt into faith in ourselves. Transformation, turning the impossible into opportunity. For years, a person might tell themselves that they'll never be confident enough to speak in public. Maybe they believe their voice doesn't matter, or that they aren't the kind of person who can stand in front of a crowd. But then one day, something changes. It's not a huge leap, just a small, quiet shift inside. They begin to see failure differently. They realize that failure isn't a reflection of their worth, but simply a part of the process, a natural step on the path to growth. So they take a small step forward. Maybe they sign up for a public speaking workshop, or maybe they just practice talking to themselves in the mirror. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Their heart races, their voice shakes, but they keep going. And slowly, that fear begins to fade. With every small effort, their confidence grows. What once seemed impossible, standing on a stage, speaking clearly and with conviction, becomes a reality. This is what transformation looks like. It's not about making one giant leap from where you are to where you want to be. It's about taking small, deliberate steps that lead to big changes over time. Transformation is the process of turning doubt into belief and fear into action. It's about facing what once scared you and discovering that you are stronger than you thought. And when you look back, the thing that once felt impossible becomes a distant memory, replaced by pride, growth, and a quiet sense of accomplishment. Transformation beyond the self. But personal transformation doesn't always happen in isolation. Sometimes, it's part of something much bigger, a collective shift that changes entire societies. Think about the women's rights movement or the fight for racial equality. These movements didn't happen overnight. They began with small acts of courage, individuals who refused to accept the world as it was and dared to believe in something better. They challenged the status quo, they spoke up when it was uncomfortable, and they inspired others to do the same. What started as small, seemingly impossible efforts eventually changed history. These transformations didn't just impact the people involved, they reshaped entire cultures. They broke down barriers and opened doors for future generations. That's the incredible thing about societal transformation. It redefines what's possible for everyone. Redefining the impossible. Think about how technology has changed our world. A century ago, people believed that human flight was impossible. And yet, the Wright brothers refused to accept that limit. Their determination to test, fail, learn, and try again eventually gave humanity wings. Fast forward to today, we can communicate across the world in an instant. We explore space, we map the human genome, and we begin to understand the very fabric of the universe. What once seemed like science fiction is now an ordinary part of our daily lives. The journey from impossible to possible is the story of human transformation, the story of persistence, curiosity, and the refusal to give up. Embracing difficulty as part of the process. Whether on a personal or societal level, the key to transformation lies in one powerful idea. Difficulty is not a sign to stop, it's part of the journey. It's easy to see a challenge and think, this must mean it can't be done. It's easy to hit a wall and believe it's the end of the road. But transformation asks a different question. How can I work with this? How can I go through it, around it, or over it? True growth doesn't come from avoiding failure, it comes from learning through it. The hidden power of struggle. In our culture, we often celebrate success, but overlook the struggle that makes it possible. We see the finished product, the success story, the invention, the breakthrough, but we rarely see the countless attempts, the mistakes, the nights of doubt that came before it. Yet, it's during those hard moments that transformation really happens. That's when we discover our creativity, our resilience, and our ability to innovate. Some of history's most transformative breakthroughs were born from failure. Alexander Graham Bell's experiments with sound led to the invention of the telephone, but only after many attempts that didn't work. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin by accident, a mistake that changed the course of medicine. If these inventors had given up after their first setback, the world might be a very different place today. Their stories remind us that failure isn't the opposite of success, it's a step toward it. The metaphor of turning a corner. The metaphor of turning a corner is a powerful one. When we're in the middle of a challenge, it can feel like we're trapped at a dead end, no way forward, no solution in sight. Everything feels heavy, frustrating, and uncertain. But transformation reminds us that sometimes we only need to keep going a little farther before the path opens up. Just when things seem impossible, we turn a corner and suddenly a new direction appears. That moment of clarity can feel like a breath of fresh air. It's the point where the weight of what once felt impossible begins to lift, and we see that there's more ahead than we ever imagined. This moment, when confusion turns into understanding and doubt turns into hope, is at the heart of transformation. It's proof that even when we can't yet see the way forward, it's still there, waiting just around the bend. Rewriting the script of your life. One of the most inspiring things about transformation is how it gives us the power to rewrite the story of our lives. Each of us carries a personal narrative, a story we tell ourselves about who we are and what we're capable of. That story is often shaped by our past experiences, by what others have told us, and by the fears and doubts we've internalized over time. Sometimes that inner story can be limiting. It might whisper, "You're not good enough," or "That's just the way things are." But transformation is about challenging that story, about realizing that the version of yourself you've believed in until now isn't the only one that exists. You have the power to change the narrative. You can decide to write a new chapter, one that's guided not by fear or limitation, but by possibility and growth. When you do that, you move beyond the boundaries of who you thought you were and step into who you can become. You start to see yourself not as a fixed identity, but as someone capable of evolving, adapting, and expanding. The mountain within. Imagine for a moment that you're standing at the base of a tall mountain. From where you stand, it looks impossible to climb. The peak is so far away, the slopes so steep, the rocks sharp and uninviting. You could turn back. You could tell yourself it's too much, too hard, too risky. But what if, instead, you looked at that mountain differently? What if you saw it not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity? What if, instead of focusing on how far you have to go, you focused on what you could learn with every step? So you begin the climb. At first, every step feels hard. You slip, you stumble, your legs ache. But with each small movement forward, something begins to shift. You start to see things you couldn't from the ground, a new view, a wider horizon, a fresh sense of what's possible. And when you finally reach the summit, you realize something powerful. You didn't just climb the mountain, you climbed the doubts, the fears, and the limits within yourself. What once felt impossible has become a victory. That's the true essence of transformation, the ability to turn challenge into growth, fear into courage, and limitation into possibility. The power of transformation. Transformation happens on every level, personal, collective, and even global. It's what allows an individual to overcome self-doubt, a community to stand up for justice, or a society to break through barriers that once seemed unbreakable. It's the process of seeing beyond what we thought we couldn't do and realizing that we can. It's the moment when I can't becomes I can, and when the impossible becomes a stepping stone to something greater. Transformation isn't a single moment, it's a journey. It's a gradual process of learning, failing, growing, and beginning again. But through it all, it reminds us of one vital truth, that we are not defined by where we've been, but by where we choose to go next. The inner dialogue, what's holding you back? Now, take a moment and think about the last time you faced a real challenge. Maybe it was at work, in a relationship, or while chasing a dream you weren't sure you could reach. What did that inner voice sound like? Was it kind and encouraging, or was it critical, doubtful, and afraid? Our inner dialogue, or self-talk, shapes how we face the world. It's the constant conversation happening in our minds, the words we use to describe ourselves, our abilities, and our worth. When that inner voice is supportive, it becomes our greatest ally. It reminds us to keep going, to trust ourselves, to try again. But when it's filled with negativity and self-doubt, it becomes our biggest obstacle. It tells us to stop before we even start, to give up before we've given our best. The truth is, the stories we tell ourselves have immense power. They can either keep us stuck in fear or help us break free and move toward growth. Transformation begins the moment you start listening to that inner dialogue and asking, is this voice helping me or holding me back? Because once you learn to change the conversation in your mind, you begin to change everything else in your life too. The inner voice, how it shapes our reality. We all have a voice in our heads. It's the voice that never stops talking. It evaluates what we do, critiques our choices, and judges our potential. Sometimes, this voice is helpful. It reminds us to stay focused, to plan ahead, or to be cautious. But more often than not, it's not very kind. It can be full of doubt, worry, and fear. And the tricky thing is, we often believe it without even questioning it. Many of us are our own harshest critics. We say things to ourselves in our minds that we would never say to a friend. We might think, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll never succeed." These thoughts might seem small, just words in your head, but they have enormous power. Our thoughts shape our emotions, and our emotions influence our actions. So if your inner voice is constantly negative, it can quietly control the way you make decisions, the risks you take, and how you approach opportunities. For example, imagine you're thinking about applying for a job you really want. Your inner voice might say, "You don't have enough experience," or "They'll never pick you." Because of these thoughts, you might hesitate, procrastinate, or not even apply at all. That voice has just created a mental barrier, stopping you before you even begin. Over time, these repeated thoughts can become mental blocks. They make challenges feel bigger than they are, opportunities seem out of reach, and goals feel impossible. In fact, your inner dialogue can hold you back more than any outside obstacle ever could. But here's the important truth: that voice doesn't always tell the truth. Most of the time, it's shaped by patterns, fears, and biases, old habits of thinking that may not match reality. One of the most common patterns is called the negativity bias. It's a natural tendency to focus more on negative events than positive ones. This bias evolved over thousands of years to help humans survive. It made us pay attention to danger, to avoid threats, and to stay alert. Today, however, this bias can work against us. We're no longer living in constant life-or-death situations, but our brains are still wired to notice danger, failure, or rejection more than success, progress, or opportunity. Think about a time when you made a mistake. Maybe you messed up at work, or forgot something important, or struggled with a task you wanted to do well. What did your mind do? Chances are, it replayed that mistake over and over. You focused on what went wrong instead of what went right. You reminded yourself of every little error, letting it feel bigger than it actually was. But the truth is, one mistake does not define you. It doesn't determine your potential or who you are as a person. Mistakes are simply a part of the process, steps toward learning and growth. The problem is, when our inner dialogue is dominated by negativity, it becomes hard to break free from this cycle. We start believing that every setback is permanent, every failure is proof of our limits, and every challenge is too big to overcome. This is why it's so important to listen to your inner voice carefully and not let it control your actions automatically. Just because your thoughts are loud doesn't mean they are true. By noticing when your mind is being overly critical, by pausing before you accept negative thoughts as fact, you can begin to take control of your inner dialogue. You can learn to shift your focus from fear and doubt to curiosity and possibility. Instead of thinking, "I'll never succeed," you can ask, "What can I learn from this? What step can I take next?" Instead of repeating, "I'm not good enough," you can remind yourself, "I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm capable of more than I think." The first step to breaking the cycle of negativity is awareness. Notice your thoughts. Observe your inner voice. Ask yourself, is this thought true? Is it helping me or holding me back? Once you start questioning your self-talk, you can begin to rewrite the story you tell yourself, one thought at a time. You can change the way you experience challenges, setbacks, and opportunities. And slowly, the mental barriers created by doubt and fear begin to dissolve. Because your inner voice doesn't have to limit you. When you learn to guide it, instead of letting it control you, it becomes one of your greatest allies, a tool to help you grow, take action, and reach your potential. Shifting your inner dialogue. When we begin to change the way we talk to ourselves, something amazing happens. Suddenly, What once seemed impossible starts to feel like something worth trying. The fears and doubts that used to hold you back begin to lose their power. This shift in inner dialogue doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, patience, and a willingness to challenge old thought patterns. But the results can be life-changing. When we become aware of how our thoughts are limiting us, we can start to break free. We can stop being our own worst critics and begin becoming our own strongest supporters. Think about your own inner dialogue for a moment. How often do you let negative thoughts dictate your actions? How often do fear or self-doubt prevent you from going after what you want? Now imagine what could happen if you changed that inner conversation. Instead of focusing on what you can't do, you start paying attention to what you can do, the progress you've already made, the strengths and skills you already have. This simple shift in perspective can transform the way you experience challenges. Your inner dialogue becomes a source of confidence, motivation, and possibility, rather than fear and limitation. Mindset: growth versus fixed. Have you ever faced a setback and thought, "I can't do this," or "I'm just not good enough"? Maybe failure felt like a reflection of your abilities, as if what you could achieve was already determined and unchangeable. These kinds of thoughts are tied to something called mindset, the lens through which we view our potential, challenges, and ability to grow. The concept of mindset was popularized by psychologist Carol Dweck, whose research on growth mindset versus fixed mindset has greatly influenced how we think about learning, success, and personal development. In simple terms, mindset is the collection of beliefs we hold about ourselves and our abilities, and these beliefs shape how we act and respond to challenges. Dweck identified two main types of mindset. Fixed mindset: the belief that our abilities, intelligence, and talents are fixed traits that cannot be changed. Growth mindset: the belief that our abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort, learning, and persistence. Understanding the difference between these two mindsets can dramatically change the way we approach challenges and growth. The fixed mindset. A fixed mindset leads us to think that failure is a reflection of who we are. If we struggle at a task, we may believe, "I'm just not smart enough. I'm not talented in this area. There's nothing I can do to change this." People with a fixed mindset often avoid challenges because they fear failure. They may give up easily or feel discouraged when they don't succeed immediately. Mistakes become proof that they are not capable, rather than opportunities to learn. The danger of a fixed mindset is that it limits growth. It keeps us stuck in familiar patterns and prevents us from discovering what we might be truly capable of achieving. Fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Some people believe that skills and abilities are something we are simply born with, that we either have them or we don't. This way of thinking is called a fixed mindset. People with a fixed mindset see challenges as threats. They worry about failure or making mistakes because they interpret these as proof of their limitations. For example, if someone with a fixed mindset faces a difficult task, they might think, "I'm just not good at this, and no amount of effort will help." When they fail, they take it personally, believing it reflects who they are rather than seeing it as a part of learning. Because of this, they may avoid challenges, stop trying, or refuse to put in effort, simply to protect their self-image. The fixed mindset often comes from a desire to appear competent. People with this mindset focus more on performance, on looking capable, rather than on learning and improving. This can lead to frustration, self-doubt, and a fear of challenges, especially those that seem too hard or unfamiliar. Now, let's contrast this with the growth mindset. People with a growth mindset believe that abilities and skills can be developed through effort, learning, and persistence. They see challenges not as threats, but as opportunities to grow. For instance, when someone with a growth mindset faces a difficult task, their inner dialogue might sound like, "This is hard, but I can learn from it. I'll try different strategies, ask for help, and keep practicing until I improve." Failure, in this mindset, is not a reflection of their worth or talent. Instead, it is a natural part of the learning process, a stepping stone toward mastery. Mistakes become teachers, not enemies. One of the most important features of a growth mindset is focusing on learning rather than performance. Success is measured by improvement and effort, not by immediate results. Challenges become opportunities to develop resilience, try new strategies, and discover strengths you didn't know you had. How feedback is handled. The difference between the two mindsets is also visible in how people respond to feedback. Someone with a fixed mindset might take constructive criticism personally, thinking it proves they aren't good enough. Someone with a growth mindset sees feedback as a tool for improvement, a guide to help them grow. This perspective makes people with a growth mindset more adaptable, curious, and willing to face challenges with confidence rather than fear. Mindset can change. The most important thing to remember is that your mindset is not fixed. Even if you've had a fixed mindset in the past, you can consciously work to develop a growth mindset. By shifting the way you think about challenges, failure, and effort, you can start to see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You can learn to embrace difficulty, view mistakes as lessons, and persist in the face of setbacks. In short, a growth mindset allows you to turn the impossible into something achievable. It gives you the perspective, confidence, and resilience needed to push past limits and discover what you are truly capable of. Transforming your mindset from fixed to growth. Changing the way we think about ourselves and our abilities doesn't happen overnight. It takes intentional effort to challenge the beliefs that hold us back. One of the most important changes is how we view failure. Instead of seeing failure as something to avoid, we can start seeing it as a natural part of learning. Every mistake or setback is an opportunity to reflect, adjust, and try again with new knowledge. This is the foundation of a growth mindset. Think about Thomas Edison, the inventor of the electric light bulb. He tried thousands of times before finally succeeding. When asked about his many unsuccessful attempts, he said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Edison didn't see failure as a personal limitation. He saw it as a step in the process of discovery. His persistence, curiosity, and willingness to learn from mistakes were key to his success. Deliberate practice and growth. A growth mindset is closely connected to deliberate practice. This means putting in focused, consistent effort over time. People with a growth mindset understand that skills are not developed instantly, they grow with practice. Instead of avoiding difficult tasks, they seek challenges because each challenge is an opportunity to improve. They know that effort, learning, and persistence will lead to gradual mastery. How to develop a growth mindset. You can start shifting from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset by practicing a few strategies. Recognize your mindset. Pay attention to your thoughts when you face a challenge. Do you think, "I can't do this," or "this is too hard"? That's a fixed mindset. If your thoughts sound like, "This is tough, but I can figure it out," or "I'll learn from this," you're leaning toward a growth mindset. Reframe failure. Mistakes aren't failures, they are lessons. Ask yourself, "What can I learn from this?" or "How can I improve?" This shift in perspective opens the door to growth. Embrace challenges. Seek out challenges instead of avoiding them. Difficult situations help you grow faster and teach valuable lessons. Focus on effort over outcome. Celebrate the effort you put in and the progress you make, not just the results. Trying, learning, and improving are more important than instant success. Why it matters. A growth mindset changes the way you approach life. It shifts your focus from limitations to possibilities, from fear of failure to excitement about learning, from avoiding challenges to embracing them. When you adopt this mindset, the word impossible loses its power. Goals that once seemed out of reach become stepping stones. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to grow, improve, and move closer to success. By practicing these principles, you develop the resilience, confidence, and perspective needed to transform obstacles into opportunities. The impossible doesn't disappear, but it becomes something you can overcome, one step at a time. Overcoming fear. How courage opens the door to possibility. Fear is something we all feel. It's a natural part of being human. Fear exists to protect us, to keep us safe from danger. But fear can also hold us back. It can stop us from trying new things, from taking risks, or from pursuing goals that feel big, exciting, or even impossible. Think about a time when you hesitated to do something. Maybe it was starting a new job, moving to a different city, or asking someone for help. The hesitation wasn't because you weren't capable. It was because of fear of failing, fear of being judged, or fear of the unknown. Fear can make a situation feel like an impossible wall, blocking everything on the other side. But often, on the other side of that wall are opportunities, growth, and new experiences. The important thing to remember is that fear itself is not the problem. Fear is just an emotional signal that something feels risky or uncertain. What really matters is how we respond to fear. Do we let it stop us, or do we act in spite of it? It's in choosing to act even when we feel afraid that we develop courage, and it's courage that opens the door to possibility. Courage, a muscle that grows. Courage is often misunderstood. Many people think you either have it or you don't. But courage is more like a muscle. It grows stronger the more you use it. Every time you face something uncertain, every time you do something that scares you instead of avoiding it, your courage increases. Courage does not mean you are never afraid. Courage means you act even though you are afraid. It is what allows us to take risks, try new things, and move forward even when we cannot see exactly how things will turn out. The cycle of fear. One of the hardest things about fear is how it can trap us. Thoughts like, what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if it doesn't work out? Can create a paralyzing loop. The more we dwell on these thoughts, the less likely we are to take action. This is where fear often keeps us stuck. When we let fear control our behavior, we stay in our comfort zones. We do what feels safe and predictable, avoiding anything that feels risky or unknown. But staying safe can also keep us from growing. Stepping out of the comfort zone. You've probably heard the phrase, step outside your comfort zone. It's easy to say, but harder to do. Our comfort zone is the mental and emotional space where we feel safe. Everything is predictable, manageable, and familiar. Fear is small here because we know what to expect. But the comfort zone can also be limiting. It keeps us in old patterns, prevents us from trying new things, and stops us from reaching our potential. True growth, learning, and transformation happen outside the comfort zone. Stepping out doesn't mean being reckless. It means taking calculated risks, steps that may make you feel vulnerable or nervous, but also carry the potential for growth. It's about facing fear, recognizing it, and choosing to move forward anyway. Every small step builds confidence and strengthens your ability to handle bigger challenges in the future. Fear, courage, and possibility. The link between fear and possibility is simple. Fear signals growth. When something feels scary, it often means it's worth doing. The things that challenge us the most are often the things that help us grow the most. By facing fear with courage, we open the door to new opportunities, new skills, and new ways of seeing ourselves. Every time you act despite fear, you are proving to yourself that you are capable. That what once seemed impossible can become possible. Courage allows you to transform fear into action, and action is what turns dreams into reality. In short, fear is natural, but it doesn't have to control you. Courage grows with practice. Your comfort zone is safe, but growth lies beyond it. And the more you face fear, the more possibilities you unlock in your life. Facing fear, turning the impossible into possible. Fear is something we all feel. It's natural, and it exists to protect us. But sometimes fear can hold us back from doing what we want or reaching our full potential. It can convince us that a goal is too hard, that a challenge is impossible, or that we are not good enough. The key is learning to act despite fear. When you choose to move forward even when you are scared, you start breaking the chains that hold you back. You begin to see that the impossible is often just a perception, a mental barrier created by fear. And once you push past it, you realize that you are capable of more than you thought. Think about the first time you tried something new. Maybe it was learning a new skill, speaking in public, or tackling a big project. At first, fear might have been overwhelming, the fear of failing, making mistakes, or being judged. But when you took that first step, something important happened. You learned, you grew, and you discovered that you could handle more than you believed. And most importantly, you strengthened your courage. Each time you face fear, it becomes easier to face the next challenge. Ask yourself, what is something you've been hesitating to do because of fear? Maybe it's a goal that feels just out of reach, or a decision you've been putting off. What's one small step you could take today to move forward? It doesn't have to be huge. Even a tiny step can create momentum and start changing the way you approach fear. Fear itself is not the enemy. In fact, it can be a guide, helping us assess risks and prepare for challenges. The problem is when we let fear control our decisions. Courage is the antidote. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the ability to act even when you feel afraid. As Mark Twain said, courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. In other words, courage is learning to move forward despite fear, rather than waiting for fear to disappear. Every time you act with courage, you prove to yourself that you are capable. You build resilience, confidence, and strength. You begin to see that fear does not have to block you. It becomes a tool that, when faced head-on, can help you grow and achieve more. Fear often stands in the way of what seems impossible. It tells us that we aren't ready, that failure is too dangerous, or that a dream is unreachable. But the truth is, fear is only a barrier if we let it be. By facing fear, embracing discomfort, and taking steps forward even when we don't have all the answers, we transform not only our actions, but also our beliefs about ourselves. The first step may feel scary, but it's also the most important. With each act of courage, the impossible starts to feel possible. You begin to realize that what once seemed too hard, too risky, or beyond your abilities is actually within your reach. Each challenge becomes a chance to grow, to learn, and to achieve. And before long, you see that the impossible was never truly impossible at all. It was simply waiting for you to take that first courageous step. Breaking free from the impossible. What we often call impossible isn't really a fixed truth. It's something our minds create, shaped by fears, doubts, and the beliefs that limit us. When we look closely, most of what feels impossible is simply uncharted territory, things we haven't tried yet, experiences we haven't explored, or challenges we haven't faced. What if, instead of seeing these obstacles as walls, we saw them as doors, opportunities to grow, learn, and expand what we believe is possible? Every challenge, every fear, every moment of doubt is actually an invitation to stretch ourselves, to take one step beyond the boundaries we thought existed. Throughout our discussion, we've seen how our mindset, our beliefs, and our fears shape what we think we can do. We've explored the power of a growth mindset, the courage to face fear, and the strength that comes from resilience. And the most powerful truth is this: the limits we see are often the ones we place on ourselves. Think about it for a moment. How often have you stopped yourself with thoughts like, "I can't do this," or "it's too hard"? Usually, those limits aren't real. They're mental barriers, conditioned by past experiences or what we've been taught to expect. But the amazing thing is, we don't have to stay within those boundaries. We can challenge them. We can expand them. We can prove to ourselves that more is possible than we ever imagined. I know this is easier said than done. Doubt and fear are natural companions when facing the unknown. It's normal to hesitate, to worry about failure, or to wonder if you're capable. But here's the key: it's in those moments of uncertainty that real growth happens. When life seems impossible, it often means you're on the edge of something new, a chance to discover strengths you didn't know you had. The secret is to embrace uncertainty. You don't need to have all the answers or perfect clarity before taking the first step. You just need to take a step. One small action, repeated consistently, can lead to transformation. Great achievements rarely happen all at once. They happen in deliberate, small steps, steps that may feel uncertain, but which gradually carry you toward something greater. So, ask yourself, what is the impossible in your life? What goal, dream, or challenge have you been avoiding because it feels too big or scary? Now imagine taking one small step toward it. That's all it takes to start shifting your perspective. With each step, the impossible begins to feel possible. With each action, your confidence grows. And with each experience, the limits you once believed in start to fade. Remember this: the only real limits are the ones you set for yourself. The power to grow, to change, and to achieve lies within you. Let go of the idea that something is impossible. Step forward into uncertainty, take action, and trust yourself. Each small step opens the door to new possibilities, new experiences, and new achievements. The journey isn't always easy, and fear may still appear along the way. But courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. Each time you face fear, each time you take a step towards something that feels impossible, you build your courage and your strength. You begin to realize that what once felt unreachable is now within your grasp. So take that step today. Start small. Embrace the uncertainty. Trust yourself. And remember, your future is limitless if you choose to believe. What once seemed impossible can become your reality. The world of possibility is waiting for you. Step into it. Thank you for joining this journey. And if this message resonates with you, share it with someone who might need a reminder. They too can break free from the limits they've set. Together, we can all start seeing the impossible as just another challenge to overcome.